For youths, achieving financial stability is crucial. Understanding money management and starting early can make all the difference. Yet in Malaysia, a concerning trend has emerged. 53,000 individuals under the age of 30 are grappling with a cumulative debt of nearly 1.9 billion ringgit. This means each person is, on average, burdened with around 36,000 ringgit in debt, a heavy weight for anyone beginning their financial journey. The Credit Counselling and Debt Management Agency, AKPK, has highlighted that 28% of working adults in the country have borrowed money just to purchase essential goods. This statistic raises alarm bells, especially as Finance Minister 2, Datuk Sri Amir Hamzah, expressed concerns over the growing accessibility of personal loans, credit cards and buy now, pay later schemes, particularly among young adults. And Malaysia is not alone. In fact, around a fifth of Gen Zs and millennials in Singapore, surveyed by insurer Ethica, found it difficult to pay off their debt. A report by Credit Counselling Singapore found that around half of the people who sought help to manage their debt in 2023 were under 40 years old. Latest data from the Bank of Thailand showed that outstanding consumer debt was ballooned to over 15 trillion baht, with the majority of that debt being held by Gen Y individuals. While these tools offer convenience, they come with risk. The lack of understanding about their implications, coupled with bad budgeting practices and poor discipline in managing commitments, can quickly spiral into unmanageable debt. It underscores the critical need for financial literacy for the economic empowerment and well-being of all Malaysians. According to the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD) Financial Literacy Survey, only 36% of Malaysians understood basic financial concepts such as interest rates, inflation, and risk diversification. This figure fell below the global average of 42%, placing Malaysia 26 out of 39 countries surveyed. With such low levels of financial literacy, alongside Malaysia's soaring household debt, which has reached 1.53 trillion ringgit or 84.2% of gross domestic product, the situation becomes even more concerning. The ratio is one of the highest in the Southeast Asian region, indicating that households are increasingly relying on credit to finance their lifestyles and investments. So what can be done to turn the tide? What roles do schools, parents, and the government play? On this week's episode of It's About Youth, we take a look at ways to foster positive financial behaviours among Malaysia's younger generation and explore how youths themselves can take charge of their financial education to build a more secure future. Hello, you're watching It's About Youth with me, Fei Kwan. The Credit Counselling and Debt Management Agency recently revealed that 53,000 individuals under the age of 30 are currently burdened by nearly 1.9 billion ringgit in cumulative debt. Joining me on the show to delve a little bit more into these figures is Siew Yuen Tuck, or better known as YT, CEO of RinggitPlus. Welcome to the show, YT.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the figures that I just mentioned earlier, these are individuals who are largely in their 20s, already in debt. What would you say these figures tell us about the financial behaviours of Malaysian youth?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. When I first saw that headline, it definitely made me worried, right? But then we started talking about it internally with our team, and we realized a couple of things. I think one of the first things is it would have been great to get a little bit more data, right? A bit more detail. Because if you take, I think it's on average, it comes to about 36,000 of debt per individual. Now, again, without more detail, it's kind of hard to say and hard to understand what that means. I think on the one hand, if the debt is being used for something positive, right? Like say if you need to buy a motorcycle or a car, or for people who are making their first home purchase, I think largely then that actually reflects that the youth are able to positively participate in the economy. But if the debt is being taken on for lifestyle purposes or for things that aren't necessarily income generating over the long term, then I think that they are right to be worried about that.
Mm-hmm. So that's the importance of data, right, for us to find out where they're spending their money. But in general, what would you say are some of the potential risks for youth who lack such financial education in something that's an increasingly digital economy?
Yeah, I've been running RinggitPlus now for 12 years, and over the last 12 years, we've seen consistently how more and more Malaysians are turning towards digital financial services. I think on the positive side, right? I think the good thing about increasing digitization when it comes to personal finances is that it makes it easier to get access, right? So like for us, we have our WhatsApp chatbot where consumers can apply anytime, anywhere. But then the flip side is when it becomes so easy to access financial services, I think something which we're very conscious about is we can't just make it easy to access, right? We also need to make sure that we make financial education easy to access as well, which is why we've always made sure that all of our financial education is available free to our consumers. We work very actively with partners to make sure that we continue to educate all segments of the Malaysian population.
I would like to go a little bit more into the accessibility part in a bit, but besides that, there's figures that say only 36% of Malaysians understand basic financial concepts. So this includes interest rates, inflation, and risk diversification, and that's below the global average of 42%. Why would you say it's critical to introduce financial literacy at an early age? How does this sort of shape long-term financial stability?
Well, I think it's of course, the earlier you start, the better. But I think it's also worth saying that if, for those Malaysians who were not able to access, financial literacy when they were younger, it's never too late to start, right? But, going back to your question, I think the way we think about financial literacy for children is that it's very much like, family values. Right? I think where it really starts is at home, right? Because as you grow up, you watch how your parents, manage their money. You learn the attitudes towards money. And I think a lot of those attitudes will then grow up with the kids. So I think it's very important that parents do invest into and spend time teaching their children, right, about the basics of financial literacy.
Mm-hmm. And how would you suggest sort of opening up those conversations for a child, especially?
I think just start with the basics, right? I think what a lot of I'm a father, right? And what a lot of our friends will do is you obviously start them off with an allowance. Right, you teach them the importance of saving, but then it's also as they get older, I think it's important that before they get access to something like a credit card, or when they open up their first bank account, do explain to them, right, like what are the pros and cons. I think something which we've noticed at RinggitPlus over the years is that a lot of people kind of grow up with a feeling about certain types of financial products, right? They can say something is good or bad. Even some will say that if a family member had lost money in investments in the past, they might say, oh, the stock market is bad. Well, so I think what we try and do when we think about financial education, I do this personally as well, is you shouldn't, let's focus on, what are the potential outcomes, right? Of any kind of financial product or any kind of financial decision, and then educate them about, what could happen, right? So if you do, for example, put your money into the stock market, how should you think about it? What is risk like, right? I think for those are for like the older children, but again, kind of coming back to younger children, start them off with this, giving them an allowance, teaching them about how important it is to save for something.
Mm-hmm. And I know there are really many roles to play. Different parts of the community, I think they all have a role to play. What about schools, you say? Where do they come in when it comes to fostering financial literacy, a sense of savings?
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a really interesting topic, because we did some research about this, and I think we learned that there are a couple countries, I think that the Nordic countries like Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, which they actually do teach financial literacy right from primary all the way through to secondary, and that's been shown to be effective. But at the same time, I can't imagine how hard it is, right? It's really beyond beyond me to comment on how schools should prioritize what they teach. I think that's a very tricky topic. I believe I have seen recently that the government has committed to reviewing whether financial literacy will become part of the syllabus here. So I think that's a very positive takeaway, that it's on the agenda. But I think it's very tricky. It's very hard when you're managing an entire national education system. It must be very hard to prioritize what goes in there.
And I think you've touched a little bit about not just accessibility to sort of financial tools, but also accessibility to financial literacy itself. These kind of things may not be as easy if you compare it between rural and urban areas. And you did say a little bit that the government is looking at introducing more financial literacy. Are there any other policies or initiatives you think that would be particularly impactful to address this gap among youth?
Ooh, wow, that's a huge topic.
Yeah, that's quite a heavy one.
Yeah, I think that's a big topic. I think maybe kind of take a step back and look at, we can look back at that. There's a good opportunity to kind of look back at what the data tells us, right? So we just ran our annual financial literacy survey. And, broadly speaking, one positive takeaway was that, there were improvements in almost every area or every aspect of financial well-being. More Malaysians were saving more Malaysians were better prepared for a financial shock, and more Malaysians were better prepared or were financially planning for retirement. I think something that's perhaps a little bit more relevant to the youth is, there's a really super interesting statistic we saw last year, right, which is that social media actually had become the most trusted source for anybody actually looking for questions about financial products. And this year, it became even more trusted, right? In second place was friends and family.
Right.
And that's very important to us, right? Because it basically tells us that, look, no, it's not just the youth, but everybody now is really looking towards social media to learn about financial products. And I think that's where, both RinggitPlus and as well as our partners are really focusing on, how do we create content that's more relevant and more engaging, and how do we put it out in places where people are, right? So that they can consume it at, in the right places for them.
I'm curious to know from your years with RinggitPlus, have you ever noticed or observed any changes in spending habits or saving habits among the youth over the years, especially post-pandemic?
I don't know. No, I think no specifics when it comes to spending habits, but I think broadly what we are seeing is a very strong and steady move towards adoption of digital financial products. Right. So, for example, I think this year it was well over 90% of Malaysians now use at least one e-wallet. Right. And I think e-wallets are actually a fantastic tool, not just for youth, but for anybody, because it allows you to actually track your spending very carefully. Right. I think PayNet has done a fantastic job to make sure that QR codes are available almost anywhere you go. It's very accessible for any kind of shop or SME to provide that. And the benefit as a consumer, right, is that whether you use whichever e-wallet or mobile banking app you use now, almost all of them will provide you with tools to actually track your expenses. I think that's probably one of the best places to start, right? I think you make sure that you have a clear idea of where you're spending your money. Because we've learned that actually a lot of people, when they don't track their expenses, they get quite surprised when they do start to write things down. And now it's just so easy, right, with the introduction of things like e-wallets.
Okay, I asked the question about spending habits, I suppose, is because social media is a very powerful tool at finding information, but it's also become a case where the grass is always greener on the other side. What you see on social media may not necessarily be the truth, but it could influence, especially youths, to sort of have to live up to certain living expectations. I suppose for us to better understand the importance of financial literacy and why it's important to address it, you said, like, even if you don't learn it in your youth, it's never too late to start. Yeah. What kind of impacts could improved financial literacy have? This is another quite heavy one, but what impact could it have in tackling broader social issues like income inequality or wealth gaps in Malaysia?
Oh, I think those things, those kinds of challenges, income inequality or wealth gaps, these are problems in countries all over the world, right? I hear about it on the news almost every day. I think to be realistic, when you think about financial literacy and financial education, I think those kinds of big structural challenges are probably those are very much for governments to work on, right? But I think what's important about financial literacy and financial education is that regardless of where you are in life or whatever your financial standing is, if you do invest time and effort into the basics of financial literacy and get a better understanding of how you manage your money and which financial products are best for you, then you will really reap the benefits over the long term, right? No matter where, no matter whatever your financial situation is at the start.
And going a little bit more into that, because we've looked at the role of parents, schools, and the government, onto the individual themselves. When you talked about e-wallets and the growing accessibility of certain things, there's always buy now, pay later schemes, which can be, very convenient, but at the same time dangerous for youths. How would you suggest one manage sort of their financial products, but also with more responsibility to avoid falling into debt?
Well, actually thinking, when you talk about products like buy now, pay later, or even credit cards or personal loans, I actually think Malaysia, from a regulatory perspective, we're actually quite lucky. Right? I think Bank Negara, we've looked very closely at all the, I can at least speak about the other countries in the region. I think Bank Negara has a very balanced and very well-balanced approach towards making sure that consumers are protected, but they can also have access to these financial products. So we think about access to debt, for example. Banks are subject to responsible lending guidelines. I believe buy now, pay later will also be subject to the new Consumer Credit Act. So I think you did ask a question earlier about what can the government do, and there are lots of examples like this where the government and the regulators do actively make sure that our financial ecosystem is healthy.
Okay, and how about social media? Can that be something that comes into play when it comes to spreading awareness and educating the people on financial literacy?
Oh, absolutely. I think our financial literacy survey told us very clearly, right? That is where Malaysians go to when it comes to understanding or when they've got questions about financial products. I think on the positive side is that there's a lot of information there, right? So it's never been easier to just pick up your phone and search if you have a question. I think then the challenge obviously is, you need to then go through multiple sources. You need to understand how do you trust the source. I think that, again, that's one of the reasons why I believe it's more important than ever that brands like RinggitPlus and our partners do work together to provide as much financial education content out there for Malaysians.
Well, to delve a little bit into that, what does RinggitPlus do? What kind of services can youths tap into?
Sure. I think broadly I can break it up into two. Right. On the one hand, we are very focused on financial education. Right. So we work very actively with our partners to understand what is it that consumers, what are the challenges that consumers face when it comes to their personal finances, and then we'll work with our partners to create the content to make sure consumers can be educated on that. And then on the other hand, we also do run Malaysia's largest online financial comparison site, where Malaysians can come and compare banking products, insurance products, investment products, and if they want to take the product, they can use our WhatsApp chatbot, apply for the product. We have a credit score-driven recommendation engine that can actually help Malaysians then be connected to or find the product that best meets their needs.
And from drawing from your experience both with RinggitPlus, but even prior to that as an investment banking analyst, and then after that co-founding RinggitPlus, I think one thing for youths really these days is that it's not enough to just save your money. It's also looking at avenues to grow your money in the future with things such as inflation and the rising cost of living. So drawing from all of your experience, what would be some of your advice for youths who would like to start investing?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Actually, I think in Malaysia, we're very lucky to have EPF as an example, right? The fact that you contribute every month and your employer contributes every month for you. I mean, we recommend to all of our staff, you should maximize your contributions. EPF is a fantastic tool. And I think ultimately it really depends on what you're comfortable with, right? And I know that our regulators do make sure in Malaysia that, when consumers are educated or when they're promoted financial products, one of the first things you have to establish is what is your risk tolerance, right? What are you comfortable with? And then ultimately, based on that, you can then decide what kinds of financial products you want to invest in.
Okay, that's interesting. Is there anything else you'd like to add on regarding this topic?
Wow, that's a big topic. That's a big question. I mean, I think when it comes to financial literacy and financial education, there's two ways to look at it, right? I think on the one hand, I think as a Malaysian, as a citizen, we should always ask, how can we do better, right? What else can the government do to support us? But then on the other hand, right, I think it's also positive that not just ourselves as RinggitPlus, but also with our partners, every year we see more and more investment going into financial education and financial literacy. And it was great to see actually in the 2024 survey that broadly, the financial well-being of Malaysians is improving. So it's good to see that the efforts that the private sector and then the government are making are actually having a very positive impact on the financial well-being of Malaysians.
That's good to hear, but of course there's always room for improvement.
Of course.
And so for anyone who's watching this, if they have zero financial literacy, no idea where to start, where would you suggest they begin?
Well, if you don't mind, I think they should just log on to www.ringgitplus.com.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Of course, yeah. All the information there is free, or you can access it anytime, anywhere.
All right, thank you so much for your insights. I've been speaking to Siew Yuen Tuck, CEO of RinggitPlus. You've been watching It's About Youth with me, Fei Kwan. Thanks and good night.